Thank you for joining the Google Maps platform built for your business webinar. I'm Dan Meyer, a product marketing manager at Google Maps platform, and this is Raleigh Smith, a senior map specialist. Today's webinar is intended to help you learn why location data is increasingly important to both enterprises and startups across many different industries, how Google is investing heavily in location intelligence, and how customers are directly benefiting from using Google Maps platform. This is the first episode in a series of webinars we'll be hosting. We'd love to answer any questions you have, so please submit them in the chat forum below, and we'll answer them after the webinar. All right, so let's get started, Raleigh.
Excellent.
So why is location intelligence important?
Primarily because the world is really changing at a pace that's just getting faster and faster, driven by the internet, by cloud, enterprise, and frankly, mostly by mobile devices. According to Forbes, 90% of the data in the world was created in the last 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and a statistic that I heard was that 85% of all enterprise data has a location component already. And then the majority of the data in the world already has or will have that location component. That will only accelerate over time. On top of that, there's been a huge increase in connected devices around the world. Right now, there are 23 billion IoT connected devices. For anybody that is unaware, IoT is Internet of Things. But by 2025, there will be 70 billion IoT devices. It's an increase in 52 billion devices, all with location.
Wow.
Those are specific location devices. Those aren't other even typical types of electronic devices. So to put that in context, that's an average of almost 6 internet-connected devices for every single person on the planet. And if you're like me and have kids and it's Christmas time, that'll probably be more like 20 connected devices. And then all of these devices will produce even more location data, making location intelligence even more crucial. To give you an example, just one off the top of my head, there is a company that does connected vehicles, and they collect 1 terabyte of data per day per car.
Wow.
That's an insane amount of data. So when you're thinking about location, really what we want to talk about with our customers and people out there is location strategy. What is your strategy for dealing with that data? Super important that you have one, and what we find is that most customers actually don't have a specific strategy for dealing with the location component of that data. And that has a lot of information available to them for use in optimizing their operations.
So how is Google Maps platform investing in location intelligence?
This is actually a great story. So in terms of Google's investment, one of the things that started from the beginning with Larry Page was this obsession with mapping in the world. He wanted to create a digital representation of the entire world. And that's what the whole enterprise started as. And he saw value in that as well. So in terms of the actual investment, Google's already invested literally tens of billions of dollars into that mapping project. So if you think about that, in comparison to the budgets of most companies, they would never even have $10 billion. Google has invested tens of billions of dollars in mapping, and it's still one of the largest investments that we make. And that investment isn't just in Google Maps. People think, oh, it's just in Maps, but it goes far beyond that across the entire enterprise. So things like Android Auto, our investments in companies like Waymo and Waze as well. So those companies are all contributing as part of that collection effort as well.
That's great.
And then another big part of that investment is the people. So if you think about it, there's literally thousands of Google engineers and map operators, people that are constantly working on improving what we have. And then there's over 1 billion active users of our maps. Those people are also helping us improve that just through iteration and usage. And then 60 million local guides. Those are your map geeks like me. I have to admit, I was a Google guide even before I joined Google, adding things to the map. So if I were to go to a restaurant, for example, and I see that they don't have a photo in their Google Maps, I'll go in and take a photo and post it. I think I have over 1,000 photos to date from different places. So if you think of 60 million people like me, constantly doing this. And that doesn't include also the billion people who are making suggestions as well.
Right, right.
And then the last is leading edge technology. So if you think about the technology that we use to collect everything, an example, one on the slide here is our Street View vehicles. Those are awful fun. They're a little dodecahedral camera, but we've taken that and miniaturized that. So there's a backpack. So I've seen pictures of guys in the Grand Canyon with that backpack with the big camera sticking over their head, walking around, taking street view, satellites that include aerial imagery, and all of this is with our own spec around how these are taken and the cameras involved and everything. That all helps us in that investment for creating that digital representation of the real world.
That's amazing. Now, what are the primary reasons that customers choose to go with Google Maps platform?
A lot of that goes back to some of the stuff we already talked about, but I think real-time and accurate data. So we talked about that collection and all of the ways that we get it and all the ways that all the people that we have collecting this data, all comes down to providing a real-time and accurate data set. And when I say real-time, we do over 25 million updates to our data per day.
Wow.
That's an incredible number, and all of those updates are available immediately to our customers as soon as we make them. So we're constantly improving the accuracy and freshness of our data through those inputs, through all our collection methods, and that's a big one that they go to. We also have the richest places data. You know, if you're thinking about maps, typically you're looking at a map to explore a place. That could be a location, it could be a business, it could be a hospital, a school, whatever that is. And Google has more of that than anybody else in the world. And again, it's that combination of Google Guides, which between the Google Guides and our 1 billion active users, they actually provide 20 million of those contributions. 20 of those 25 come from that methodology.
Wow.
So that's a big number, and I think that's a big part of why customers come to us. And then again, maps your customers know and love. This is something that, again, if you have 1 billion users, these are our users that are constantly in there. And if you think of a consumer, they're also an enterprise customer. They have jobs, they have places that they work. And what we find is that they'll often, even if it's a company that doesn't use Google Maps, they might not have it as part of their workflow for their applications. We'll find that people in the company will still use Google. So let's say they have an operation where they're using Maps and they don't like the mileage that they were giving. Maybe they're a logistics company that pays on mileage. Google often becomes the arbiter for things that they see there. So that's something we would love to get our maps and that data directly into companies' workflows.
Right. And not to mention business users are using Google Maps as consumers, so they already know how to use Google Maps. They know how POIs and roads are represented on Google Maps, so there's no learning curve.
Exactly, they jump right into it. And then lastly, I think global coverage, that's a big one. Anybody that is using Google Maps today understands the breadth of coverage. So we have 99% of the countries and territories mapped. That comes out to about 40 million miles of road. Again, we already talked about 150 million plus places where we actually update with 700,000 new places every month. Now that's not including the adjustments we make to the 150 million that are already there. That's 700,000 new.
Wow.
And then we cover 74 languages worldwide, which I think is kind of amazing too.
That is amazing.
Yeah. One of the things, well, lastly, real quick, one of the things we talked about is, we haven't talked about is the routing as well. So when you're thinking about places, you want to, obviously, how do I get to it? You know, that's and Google does that very well. So not only do we provide the vehicle routing, we also provide routing for bicycles. We provide routing for walking. We provide routing for public transportation as well. And that's for more than 3.8 million stations worldwide. That's a really big number. And that's in 20,000 cities, 78 countries for helping people get from place to place. And then finally, let's go with scalable performance. I think this is something everybody understands with Google. High security, high performance, extremely large network coverage, all built on the largest and best network worldwide.
So what are the products that customers can use to build location-aware experiences?
Sure. Google has we've broken them out into three primary products and services. Their maps, their routes, and their places. So maps, you're thinking about your actual physical map, the thing that you look at. It's also your street view we include in that. Static maps, the actual base map itself, that's going to be covered under your maps. Under the routing, which talked about that, that's the actual directions from point A to B. But it can also be point A to B to C to D. It can have multiple waypoints in there. You can also have optimized routing. So you can do you can say instead of point A to B to C, you could say I have these 10 points, throw them in the hopper, shake them up and throw out the most optimized route. And then our distance matrix API, which it tells how things relate into the world in a more efficient manner. So the idea of saying, I want to know how far these things are from these things, put them in and we'll give you that answer in terms of distance and time. And that's going to be important for people who really need to understand the real time of that. So we have both traffic and historical traffic to help people with that as well. And I think we have the best of that. And then there's the places. We talked about that quite a bit already. So that's going to be your points of interest, which we talked about. And points of interest aren't necessarily just a business per se. It could be a school, it could be a hospital, library, things like that. And then we also have our autocomplete as part of our places, which is an important API, which helps do the autofill for typing.
And not to mention geocoding and geolocation, right?
Right, yeah. So let's talk for a second about what those actually support. What do they actually do? So they support, really there's too many use cases to provide. There's 5 million active sites using Google, which is an absolute ton. And there's so many use cases within there, but let's cover just a few of the highlights. So things like rideshare, transportation and logistics, real estate, travel. We have financial services, retail, insurance, healthcare, so many that it's really hard to cover them all. And all of those use that in some unique way. And then all the rest of random one-off use cases that we see as well. So in terms of what are some of the things that those people do, the ride shares, the logistics, the healthcares, what do they do with those maps, routes, and places? They do things like optimize their operations. Let's just use that as an example, retail. We'll go into e-commerce for a second. Roughly 2/3 of all carts are abandoned.
Wow.
It's a huge number. That's virtually everybody. And it's not unusual if you're shopping for Christmas, you're going online and you're making carts. If you're like my wife loves to put things in carts. That's not something I do, but she loves to put things in carts, and then she'll just abandon it. And then, but the interesting thing, and I think the more important stat of that, is that 26% of those people that are abandoning carts abandon it in the checkout process.
Wow.
So they didn't just put things in there in the cart and then just walk away. They actually got to the point where they were checking out and then walked away. So I think that's a big one. And the reason they do it, the most often given reason, is the checkout process took too long. So we are there to help them with that particular process and get them through that faster with things like our autocomplete. And then another example I'll use for something that they do is call centers. The specific example I'll use today is financial technology. So in the financial technology industry, one of the most expensive things that they do is call centers. And so in order to make those operations more efficient, we could provide them with things like our Places API, so that if somebody has a question about it, they, instead of calling into the call center, which is one of the most expensive operations they have, they can go into their mobile device, look up a transaction and see where that transaction took place, look at the actual business, maybe see it on a map. This is something that I have an actual experience with. So my father, I took him to a concert. We went to a Moody Blues concert at the Hollywood Bowl. And he had bought a CD. You know, they had the guys with the little tables out front and they're hawking the t-shirts and everything. So he bought a CD, which I Wasn't even thinking about it. And then a month later, he gets his statement and he does his due diligence, goes through and checks every single thing. And he couldn't figure out who ABC Widgets was. It was just some random company name
Right.
that has nothing to do with the Moody Blues or the Hollywood Bowl. And he didn't remember it. And he's trying to think, I didn't buy anything from ABC Widgets. So he called the call center. And it took, probably about 5 minutes for them to figure out, well, Mr. Smith, did you happen to buy a CD? He's like, a CD? He's like, oh, that's the day we went to the concert. Yes, I bought a CD. Thank you very much. Well, it was great, and they helped him out, and it was a good experience for him. But how much better for both if he could have just gone onto his mobile phone and clicked on that and shown that, oh, this purchase was made at the Hollywood Bowl.
Right.
And that would have immediately triggered, oh yeah, I bought a CD there.
Right. And I would have shown a picture of the Hollywood Bowl and like where it is on a map. And
how much cost would that save them and make it even faster and better for my dad? I mean, he's a friendly person, a bit like me, but even he doesn't want to call centers.
Right. And I've seen a stat from Barclays Card that the average customer service call costs between $10 to $15 for a company to operate. So each time they're eliminating a call, they're saving $10 to $15. Which is amazing.
That's crazy. Those numbers scale very quickly, especially for somebody like a Barclays. That would be immense numbers. Another example would be a city DOT. That would be Department of Transportation. That example I find hilarious because this came about from a city street in Chicago that was dug up 3 times by 3 different entities within the cities: the electrical, the cable, and the sewage. The same block, 3 different times within a couple of months of each other.
That's crazy.
And it just drove them crazy. And one of the things that we were able to help them with was to develop a solution that allowed them to all come in and make a reservation for digging things up. So for example, if I, working at the electrical company, needed to dig something up, I would go in, I would make the reservation, and then they would send that out to everybody else. So you, working in another group that manages cable for the cable companies, you get to go in and say, oh yeah, we actually have some work to do there. We're gonna jump in on that. So you dig it up once, everybody comes in, does the work that they're gonna do, and then you put it back together instead of just this crazy hodgepodge. And all of that is actually powered by a combination of all 3 of those platforms we talked about: the maps, the routes, and the places. And then finally, managing time. So optimizing your operations, doing this in real time, as well as predictive as well. And time is really important. When you think about it, a lot of applications deal in distance. And this is something that is interesting. So if you think of somebody coming to visit you for the holidays, the first question they're going to ask you is, okay, Dan, how far are you from the airport? And your first question, and by the way, that was a distance question, how far?
Right.
So your first thing you're going to say is, well, when are you coming in? And they're going to answer you, well, I'm coming in on Friday at 5. And you're going to say, oh, brutal. Okay, well, it's going to take you about an hour and a half. Now,
especially in the Bay Area.
Especially in the Bay Area. So think about about that answer though. They asked you a distance question.
Right.
But you gave them a time response because that's really what they're asking for. So anytime you're doing routes and everything, you're really most interested in that ETA. How long is it going to take me to get to that? So Google is extremely good at helping people understand where things are related to each other in the world, and then how long it takes to get from each place. But we also do the miles as well, so help you understand and optimize those miles, so to help you understand how to reduce real-world costs like fuel and things like that.
That's great. Well, that's it for the presentation portion part of our talk. We'll be back in a minute for some frequently asked questions from customers. Welcome back. So Raleigh, let's get into some frequently asked questions from customers.
Great.
So one that we get often is, I have an e-commerce site. What benefits can autocomplete provide?
That's one of my favorite. It's weird. It's weird to have a favorite API. Mine personally is the autocomplete API. I don't think it gets talked about nearly enough. It is extremely valuable API set that we provide to our customers. Most people have actually used it and they already know what it is without knowing that. So if you've ever used Google Maps and you start to type in the address of where you're going, you'll notice that it starts to auto-populate and then starts to give you suggestions on which addresses to pick. That is an API that we actually provide out to our customers called the API, or the autocomplete API. And so what does it do? It really improves time and accuracy. But what does that mean in the real world? So in terms of time, instead of having multiple fields where you might start typing in the address in one field that's 123 Main Street, and then you drop down to the other field that's Mountain View, and then the next field, which is California, and on and on. That takes a long time, and that's really something that you want to avoid. If we talk about enabling the faster checkout and deliveries, that time is really important because there's $4.6 trillion lost every year from abandoned carts. That number is staggering to me, and that's a big number, but if you really think about it, so 2/3 of those people are abandoning their carts. We talked about that previously. But the more important statistic is that 26% of those people are abandoning the cart because the checkout process took too long. And that's really going to be something that you want to avoid. And we can help that 26% by getting you through that process faster. So instead of having multiple fields, we give you a single field, and then we provide those suggestions to allow them to select an address and get them through that process much, much faster. And then the second part of doing that is that accuracy. So if you think about it, if you're a company that does, let's say, deliveries. So Dan, you got a company that does deliveries, and you have people that actually go out into the world. If you want to talk about expensive for an operational cost, think about, we're talking about call centers. Think about an actual human getting in a vehicle and going out into the world to deliver something, whether it's a package or food or something else. That's massive. So if you want to make sure that you have an actual address, something that's there's no misspellings which cause issues or anything like that, autocomplete takes care of that to ensure that when Dan goes out into his little car and you drive out, that you're going to have an actual address. Or if you're just an e-commerce company and you want to make sure you have an accurate billing number, because those cause big problems as well. As much of that as you can avoid can really bite into that 26% number of people abandoning their carts and then causing issues later with address issues.
Because incorrect shipping addresses can lead to late shipments, lost shipments.
Lost customers. I mean, it goes beyond just that, you didn't get your hot dog, and there's a lot of options out there. You're probably never coming back to that one again. So if you think about the cost of acquiring a customer, being able to maintain that customer through accurate data and timely data is something that's going to be really important.
Absolutely. We want to talk about ROI too of autocomplete?
Yeah, I really think that's going to be something that's huge. So we talked a little bit about the time and the accuracy, but let's talk a little bit about the actual ROI that brings. So if you look on the screen, we actually have an example, just a sample. It's not a specific one, but it takes into account some of these things like the autocomplete abandonment rates per day, how much that would be in terms of that 26%, and then if we could bite into that, and then the average value of that order to get to some number of an ROI. It's an easy one to calculate with the autocomplete. But I think that an even more important part, because this is a specific number that you can talk about internally at your company to understand what they're doing, but I think we don't even talk about in this ROI calculation the intangibles. Again, we talked a little bit about Dan's never coming back. He's not going to order from you again. So you're gonna miss out on that. And I think that's an important piece as well. So it's not just the loss of that particular order that you're going to miss out. It's also those intangibles of that customer going away as well.
And another question we get is, what value can Google Maps platform provide to travel apps?
Now this, in terms of applications, this is a great example. Thank you for providing that, because I travel a lot and I use travel apps a lot. And in researching this, I thought it was funny that that one of the statistics they talked about was what's most important to people when they're traveling, and it's how far am I from the airport, how far am I from the thing I'm trying to visit,
Right.
and then the one I found the funniest was food.
Of course.
Yeah, food. So is there a place for me to be able to find food? And what kind of food is there? So Google can really help people manage that, whether it's a business traveler and I'm looking for something more elegant or upscale for a business meeting, or I'm traveling with my children and I need to understand, is there a family-friendly restaurant? I want to make sure that the kids are going to enjoy themselves too. And how far away is that? Am I going to have to drive there? Am I going to have to take a ride share? Am I going to have to walk? Right. All of these things are super important. And then one of the things that is really changing about that way is smartphones. That's absolutely changing the way people both research and book their travel. It's something that I do more and more often. Even when I'm at home, I think it's funny that I'll have a computer right there and I'll sit there on my phone and do research for things. Yeah. I think that's hilarious. But the idea is that you're not just doing that at home, you're doing that in the world. But if you think about that, almost all searches on phones have location element as well. And so the idea of being able to provide that data for us, when I say that, I mean travelers, being able to provide that data for us in real time as we're out in the world only makes people more sticky to your application. Because again, there's lots of options out there. If you think of the number of travel sites, you want to be able to provide the best possible application you can. And then you also want to make sure that people are finding the things that they need. If they're looking up a point of interest, for example, a restaurant or something that they know is there, and they're not finding it in your application,
right?
How many times can you do that to a customer before they go searching for somebody else? So you want to make sure you have the most accurate data possible.
Absolutely. And let's switch gears to financial services. So other than branch locators and customer databases, how else do banks use location services?
So it's funny, we talked about call centers, and we actually talked about how they can improve that, so reducing those call center expenses. I think that there's actually quite a few other ways that they can use us. So again, the store finder, where's the nearest bank, where's the nearest ATM? The call center, how are we helping them improve their customer experience before getting them to the call center? But we actually work in the call centers as well. So when my father did call, he very likely was talking to somebody who was looking at a Google map to help understand, oh, this is at Hollywood Bowl. Did you buy a CD? That kind of helped them on that way.
Right.
So that's another way of helping in that same example of call centers. But also, aside from that purchase transaction visualization, think something like risk management. One of the things that they've found is that people rarely make a physical card purchase that isn't near their physical phone location. So think about that. How often do you go anywhere without your phone?
Hardly ever.
How often do you travel without your physical card?
Pretty much never.
Yeah, so that's a big red flag. And so banks have figured out they can utilize the Google platform to say, how far is that phone? Dan just made a purchase at this restaurant in Mountain View, but his phone is in New York. So that's something where that creates a red flag to help them with that risk management process. Doesn't mean they deny the transaction, probably not, but does it mean they immediately take a look at it? Absolutely. So that's something that can be used for the fintech as well.
Awesome. And let's talk about places a little bit. So what are the key trends happening with places data, and is there anything unique about what Google offers for places?
Yeah, so we do. One of the things that obviously makes us unique is the numbers. So we have a lot. It's pretty funny though, no matter what number we come up with, there's always some other number that somebody else might have. But it's not just the places, it's how we maintain it. It's how we collect it. So think about it. You've got Dan's Burgers, and you're getting ready to open up. What's the very first thing that you're going to do? You're going to make sure that that is searchable on Google Maps. You're going to go in and you're going to make sure that is created as a point of interest. You're going to make sure people can find you. And when you do that, that's immediately available to our enterprise customers as well. So they have the ability to make sure that Dan's Burgers shows up on the map also. That is, along with the other collection methods. Again, we talked about the 1 billion unique users. We've talked about the 60 million Google Guides. All of us are constantly making those ads. I talked about that I've done pictures for a lot of them. I've also done random things like the store hours. Like the store hours are just wrong. I'll go in and I'll make those corrections myself. So if you're thinking about it, we have this group of 1 billion people out there in the world ensuring that our data is the most accurate data out there, including the owners of the businesses themselves. I think that is really going to be the primary reason why our places are the best.
Got it. So another question we have gotten is, I'm interested in learning more about your partner network. What advice would you give?
Okay, that's actually a good question. So Google does the majority of our direct licensing through our partner network. And the reason being is they help us scale. And we're a bit different, though, than a lot of companies that go through partners. A lot of companies that use partners, it's strictly for scale. And while that's a good reason for what we do and why we do it, there's also another part of that, and that is because our partners actually bring something to the table beyond the ability to sign paperwork and do billing and things like that. All of them are extremely mature in the geospatial industry. They all have a lot of experience in working with customers, obviously our own. And then think of them as our consulting group. So if I have a customer that comes to me and says, Raleigh, I have a great development staff, no issues there. The problem is we have this new feature we want to get out there before the holidays, and we just don't have any time in our schedule to dedicate any of that great development work or development people that we have. So they'll say, can you help us with that? And the answer is yes. And the reason that I can is because our partners. They're our system integrator network. So I would go to one of our partners and bring them into the customer, and we would be able to help those customers through our partner network. So again, our wonderful partner network, and it's not just the ability to license Google Maps, it's because they are in fact experts in our industry.
Got it.
Great question though.
So another question we received is, does Google Maps platform offer indoor mapping?
We do, oddly enough, but not through Google Maps. So that's the one caveat I have to say. You had asked about the partner network, so that's funny that comes up directly after. Our indoor mapping is through our partners. So they do have that ability to do indoor mapping. And think about it like if you're going to go to, since we're in the Bay Area, we'll talk about the Golden State Warriors. You're gonna go to the Golden State Warriors game, you buy a ticket, and they might want to provide a much better user experience for you and have the ability to give you a route. So you bought your ticket, let's say as part of that ticketing process, you actually bought a parking space as part of that. And so they want to give you directions from your house to your parking spot. And when you buy it, let's say it's probably not something you do every day. So they might give you an ETA that says, hey, Dan, by the way, you should probably leave at 6 o'clock in order to get to 7:35 game time. They could do things like that. But then let's say they want to take it a step further and get you from that parking spot to your actual seat. So they want to be able to show you the best door to go into, the best location to walk to your specific seat or section, something like that. Or then let's say you're in the middle of the game and they want to be able to provide you directions to get a hot dog. And it sounds weird, like how hard is it to find a hot dog? It's not that you can't find a hot dog. What they want to be able to do is through indoor mapping, be able to provide you the best hot dog place. And what I mean by that is this one that's closest to your seat might have a really long line, and there might be one right around that corner that has hardly anybody at it. Through indoor mapping and understanding that location, they can guide you to that shorter line. It does two things. It makes sure that you have a better experience. You got your hot dog, you got it faster, you're back in your seat, you're a happy guy.
Right.
But the second thing it does increases their revenue. So they got two things out of one single event, and that was they got an increase in revenue, they got a happier customer, all through indoor mapping. Another example of that and the usefulness for indoor mapping would be, say, micro-targeting at a grocery store.
Okay.
So I'm going to Walmart. My wife has sent me to Walmart. I don't know if you're like this, but my wife is constantly sending me, and I don't know where anything is. So it would be wonderful to have a map within the mobile device to help me find that Cheese Whiz or that marshmallow fluff, because those are, I can tell you from experience, impossible to find. So if I could have an indoor map that would allow me to find that, that's something that would be useful. But again, the indoor mapping is through our partners.
Is that a common request to, honey, go get me some Cheese Whiz?
The Cheese Whiz is always on the list, yeah.
Nice. Another question we get often is, how does Google Maps platform use machine learning or ML in its products?
Yeah, that happens a lot and is extremely useful for anybody who follows the cloud platform. Our actual machine learning is the world leader by far. And we use that internally as well to improve our products. Think about, we had talked about the ability to utilize satellite imagery or not just satellite imagery, aerial photographs, things like that. We could take our machine learning and build out road networks that didn't exist before within our data set. Using machine learning allowed us recently to spin up a whole new country that never existed in our data set before, and it was done 100% through machine learning.
Wow.
And we spun up an entirely new country in a matter of days and weeks, versus that, think about having to get a car out there or somebody walking. We did 100% of that through machine learning. That was road networks, that was POI, all of that. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And I think that's only going to get better and faster.
That's impressive. And then I think the last question we have from customers is, what about Street View? Is Google still making a big bet on Street View?
Yes, answer is yes. And it's interesting. Street View, I think, is a great product. We're definitely adding to that. It's constant. We had talked about how it used to be just cars, and then it was people on backpacks. Well, now you can actually use your own camera to collect Street View imagery. So you can take a GoPro, or there's a bunch of options that are like sub couple $100, literally, to collect Street View imagery. So the idea is customers can collect their own. We had a customer who is an arena, and they did Street View of their arena. So it's funny, you think Street View, but it's being used from an indoor scale as well. So when you're buying your tickets, you can actually go to your specific seat and use full Street View, that whole 360 panorama up and down. You can tour their entire facility, even down onto the basketball court. And this allows you to utilize Street View. And they collected that data themselves, and they own that data. And they just integrated it with our APIs and using our Street View technology to present it to their customers. But that's a use case that I think is going to only continue to grow and grow. And I think another one, the reason I personally like Street View and find importance is, think about this one. It's a funny example that happened to me. I ordered through a delivery service food in San Francisco. And it was during kind of rush hour time, 6 o'clock. And if you've ever been in San Francisco, it's absolutely gridlock in the late afternoon. And the guy missed my door because he didn't realize the building I was in, what it looked like. And so he had to go around the block. You're like, go around the block. How long can that take? Half an hour.
Oh my God.
30 minutes for him to get back around that block to make my delivery. Had that company implemented Street View, he would have seen exactly what that door looks like and been able to see that door, okay, here I am, and not miss that,
Right.
and then have to make that. Think about the cost there. Again, a human out in the world in a vehicle
Right.
making a delivery.
Right.
That's extremely costly. How many deliveries did they then miss because he was taking that extra time?
Right.
All that
Right.
kind of
Right.
comes back to all that flow through.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there's Street View tours too, right? Where business owners can
Yeah.
go with Street View into their business, provide a 360-degree view of inside their business, which helps promote their business, let customers see what it looks like before they visit.
That's a great example. Think of that if you were doing that for one of your homes. If you were renting out one of your homes on one of the sites, the travel sites, you could do a full street view of your house. You could walk them in right from up your front drive and into the house and see it.
Pretty impressive.
I think that's really cool. I would love to see that, by the way.
So we hope you found today's webinar helpful. As you've heard today, location data is more important than ever to businesses, as the majority of the data in the world already has or will have a location component, and the amount of location data is expanding rapidly. We also talked about how Google continues to invest heavily in location intelligence by spending tens of billions of dollars in mapping the ever-changing world to develop accurate real-time location data that is updated over 25 million times a day. To put that into context, that's 289 updates every second of every minute of every day to our data. And our data also covers over 99% of the world. There are multiple ways also that our customers benefit from our APIs, including improved user experiences, better conversion efficiency, and automated, optimized operations. Be on the lookout for additional webinars from us in the near future. And if you have additional questions about Google Maps platform or would like to speak to sales, please click the link in the chat forum below to visit our website. The URL is g.co/mapsplatform. Thanks and have a great day.